Okay. We really need no introduction for you, Mayim, but you obviously are well known for your acting career, including the 1990s NBC sitcom Blossom, your portrayal of the young Bette Midler in Beaches, and playing Amy on the hit show The Big Bang Theory. In addition to your new TV show, congratulations, Call Me Kat, now playing on Fox. But we're really here to speak with Dr. Mayim Bialik, the one who received a Ph.D. in neuroscience from UCLA and cares deeply about mental health. Today, we'll chat about being a child of immigrants from Eastern Europe, in addition to some of her passions like attachment parenting, vegan cooking, Jewish text study, which she discusses on her Feller website. And we will, of course, share info about Breakdown, her new quirky, informative, interactive podcast, breaking down the myths and misunderstandings about mental health and emotional well-being. So without further ado, Dr. Mayim Bialik.
Thank you, Rabbi Lerner. It's really nice to be here.
It's great to have you. Can we start just by getting a sense of, you could have done a podcast about just about anything. Why wellness? Why mental health?
Well, I mean, several reasons. I'm trained as a neuroscientist, and thank you for the lovely shout out for being a Bruin. I'm trained as a neuroscientist, and the topic of my thesis was obsessive compulsive disorder. So, I've kind of resonated in the fields of mental health as an academic person. But my personal story is that, like many of us, I come from a family with a lot of complexity, and some of that complexity comes out in humor, and, we're a really hilarious bunch. But like many families, especially many families with an Eastern European history, especially one that is so close to a lot of complexity, my family was not free of many of the challenges that many people identify as mental health challenges. So I grew up in a home that was riddled with, sounds like a hard phrase, but, I grew up in a home with mental illness, and I've, essentially, I want to say struggled my whole life. I have lived with different aspects of mental health challenges for as long as I can remember, like even from before I remembered, that was a thing. Someone once asked me, like, when did you first realize? Like, as a kid, you don't realize it. You do the things that make you feel better, and you don't know that you clinically are diagnosed with OCD in sometime in your future. It's just like, these are the things I do. And kids have a lot of quirks, and they, as a mom of a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old, sometimes they outgrow them. And many things I did outgrow. And, my teen years was really when I started having a lot of problems with depression, and, anxiety is sort of a constant companion for me. But my family's been touched by suicide more than twice. And, those are things that we didn't used to talk about. And so, this last year of life, when many of us were kind of home incubating all sorts of things, I started hearing from friends who didn't have a history of mental illness that, gosh, I'm feeling like, what is it? Why can't I sleep? Why do I feel like that? What's this rock in my chest? I'm like, oh, that's heartburn. It's likely from anxiety. So, people who've kind of been living with mental health challenges, like many of us can identify it, and like, oh, I can see that my anxiety absolutely increased, especially with the anticipatory anxiety of the election and the virus and like all this stuff. And it's gone up and down, but it was during that year that my partner, Jonathan, and I decided, like, we have this time, we have this space, we built this podcast studio. That's what I chose to kind of, you don't start a podcast because you want to make a lot of money. Like, you start a podcast because it's something you believe in and you're passionate about. And we have a really great team, that works with us, and we're available on Spotify and anywhere you get podcasts. And we also, I have almost 1 million followers on YouTube. And so we also broadcast the podcast. Jonathan, who sits in that corner, we wear matching outfits every episode. So if that's not reason to watch us live, I don't know what is.
There we go. Okay, I got muted, but I'm back. Wow. So look, there's like an intensity, here between having a very real reality in your own life and things that have happened in your family. And yet the breakdown, like, you laugh a lot. Try to sort of make note, sort of try to make light of things. Is humor for you a coping mechanism, do you think, or what's going on?
I mean, yeah, I think for any, for any comedian, there's tragedy underneath it. Comedy is tragedy plus time, we like to say. And, I think that I'm not the kind of person, I mean, you know me very well and for a long time, and Rachel and Giselle, like people who know me kind of know all the levels of me. But for many people, I'm not the kind of celebrity who wants to do a podcast where I say, I've figured everything out and come and listen to, like, here's the way I meditate and here's the things that you should do. This podcast is, from someone who's a real person who's still figuring it out. I didn't think I'd be 45 and still like learning new things about myself. I got married at 27 and I was like, all right, that was good. Let's live the rest of life now. But you're constantly growing, learning things, like being challenged by people. And I am a work in progress. So yes, humor is a big part of being self-reflective for me. I cannot live my life without therapy. That's just something true for me. I think everyone should go to therapy. I'm also one of those people, but part of therapy is learning self-awareness. And for me, that self-awareness comes with the ability to say, like, this is hilarious. Like, this complexity is real. And the notion is not to make light of mental health, but to be able to say, like, there are funny aspects even of my darkest parts, and I think that's also a very kind of Jewish concept, to be able to kind of like take something and find all the dimensions of it, we're the cubism of religious practice.
Yeah, we may not have had much of a choice over the years.
Let's see how much pressure we can put on one people and see if they can still come out okay.
Indeed.
Oh, let's make them good at music. That'll make it better.
Very nice. You have to say that you're surprisingly open. I think it's, it can be tempting as a public personality to always show the polished self, or to just show, whatever your publicist is telling you to do. And so I appreciate the ways like in which you're super honest. You bring in stuff about your, your family. We talk about our kids actually quite a bit. So, you at one point were like a big advocate of something called attachment parenting.
Mm-hmm.
We're like in the midst of COVID and the worst maybe attachment moment in history. Like, how's that going for you?
Well,
first of all, what is it?
Okay, so attachment parenting is a style of parenting that's more often associated with like the pregnancy, birth, labor, young years of a child's life. Some of the main tenets of attachment parenting are things like, natural birth and breastfeeding and, sleeping near your child, not using other caregivers when you can be the primary caregiver, things like that. But one of the aspects of attachment parenting is also gentle discipline. And so that's something obviously that continues as long as you're, in a position to be disciplining your children. My older one is taller than me now, so I already feel like it's like a blow to my authority. He's taller than me. But the notion of attachment parenting does not imply that you never get time to yourself. And I think what a lot of people are experiencing now, especially if you have, kids or teens, is like, it's a lot of closeness. And I think even if you're not a parent, I have friends who were struggling in their marriage, and it's like the universe saying, how about if you can never leave the house and you got to figure it out? 2020 was a real year of reckoning. And the hippies in my life have been like, we knew that it would be a year of, hindsight. It's like, okay, you could have given us a heads up.
Right, Saturn is like aligned with something.
I know, Mercury's in retrograde. Everybody's telling me all week. Every time I yell at myself this week, people are like, be gentle with yourself. Mercury's in retrograde. Okay.
Fair enough. Look, we all wish that we could rewind before the pandemic, right? That it, wasn't happening. So actually, I do want to go back to that moment in time, because I've noticed, I've been on campus since 2012. When I came, like, we were talking about acute, or onset type of stuff that would happen. So primarily looking for changes that happen, with people between 18 and 25. As their neurobiology, changes, and stuff that they never knew about themselves begins to come out. But it was much more of a focus on like major things that might come up. By 2018, I'd say we were really focused on depression and anxiety in particular. They don't really want to admit it, but the studies have been coming Students right now indicate that probably 50% of them are on some kind of, medication. Point, like, what's going on? What's changed between 2012 and 2020 that it really looks different?
I mean, I'm not the best person to speak to this. I'm one person, who can speak to this. I think, I think there's people far more educated than I am about, some of the larger trends. And also, it's nice to see kind of a diverse, age representation here, on this intimate chat with all my Hillel friends. I don't mean to sound like an old person, but the impact of technology is incredibly significant, and it's significant in phenomenal ways. It's significant in ways that make me feel like I'm living in, either Star Trek or the Jetsons, depending on your demographic preference. However, the shift in attention, the shift in expectation, and the shift in immediacy, these are not small shifts. And, I remember when I was a kid and I first saw a microwave, it was at Janice Greenspan's house, and they were wealthy, as far as I was concerned. And she's like, if you put a mug of water in this box, it gets hot in 2 minutes. And I was like, what? That was enormous. And, when you think of what plastic did, right? I mean, there are all these changes in history, even in our lifetimes, that have been enormous. But this one seems to be, exceptional in its intersectionality, and while making the world smaller in really beautiful and special ways is really good. The amount of information that we get at the pace that we're getting it and the frequency that we are experiencing it, the human brain cannot adapt to that, and, when people say to me, like, what do you think of AI? And what do you think of this? What I think is that we're animals, we're primates, we are mammals, and we have been coded for hundreds of thousands of years and millions of years of an evolutionary process to have relationships with other people, to touch, to talk, to be face-to-face, to read facial signals. Like, that's what we're primed for. It's what we're coded for. So while all these other things are enormously significant and important, and technology is great, that is a large part of what's happening. And in addition, we're still seeing the effects of World War II. In the Jewish community, we are still seeing the effects of fleeing from all over the world, essentially. I grew up with Operation Exodus and, learning about Russian Jewry and Ethiopian Jewry. And, those are communities that are especially affected. My Persian friends, many of them fled Iran as children and lived as refugees, to show up on these shores, right? So there's that's also always going on, but you put it all together and we have, really a culture of isolation. As much as we think we're interconnected, we're really forming a culture of isolation, and it's right here, it's a computer in your pocket. And, just like general shout out to being Jewish, the point of the Sabbath, is to say, I'm a human being, I'm not a human doing. And that kind of weekly regeneration, which our tradition has supported for thousands of years, is significant. I'm not saying that like God knew that we'd have cell phones, but if nothing else, like the progress of humanity, which needs to and has to happen, is not met with a development of a brain and a heart and a mind that can change at the same pace. And I don't know that I want to change, to be a robot.
You don't?
Well, I'm sure some people would prefer that.
Maybe.
I cry a lot, and I'm assuming as a robot, I would cry less.
Oh, fair enough. Huge shout out to Shabbat. I feel it kind of saves our family. Like, everybody in my house now has their own screen. And it used to be when we had a central screen one, that at least people were in the same room. But now it really feels like everybody's off in their own isolated, and it's not even that my house is like that big. It's just everybody wants to be doing their own specific algorithmic, kind of thing. And Shabbat's like totally different. Like for 25 hours, we're just kind of all in the same, in the same place.
Well, you're in the same space, even if you're not in the same place, right?
Yeah, totally. So let's talk about the Jews.
What's up with those Jews?
You talking about it on your podcast. I
talk about it a lot on my podcast.
Yes, you do. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I theorize that the descendants of people who survived are most likely the descendants of those who were a little bit more anxious, right? Yeah. Like they looked around my family looked around during the pogroms and was like, this isn't going to end well. And they left before the Third Reich, right?
Right.
It was just going to continue. And then other people who were like, yeah, I think it's going to be fine.
Well, there's also people who didn't have resources. Well, yeah, there's also, I mean, that's a rough example, Rabbi Lerner. Let's just hold on.
Okay, so talk to me about the DNA of.
I mean, we can take it back before the Holocaust. Evolution absolutely favors vigilance. Replace the word anxiety with vigilance, and evolution favors those who see patterns and apply those patterns to situations that are a little bit different, but have enough in common that they need to carry over that information. So the notion that you will be taken advantage of, or you will be manipulated, or you will be murdered, right? And there are certain situations where, being able to take that situation and not assume everything's going to be okay is actually evolutionary. It's beneficial. So our genetic pool did absolutely get flooded, with a particular kind of survival, and the bottlenecking which occurred somewhere, in the pale, as we say. There was a genetic bottlenecking that came, from a lot of killings elsewhere that centralized, especially the Eastern European Jewish community. Our gene pool got very small. It's why we have all these diseases. It's why we have higher proportions of Gauchers and Tay-Sachs, and this is why when people are like, Judaism's just a religion. The fact is, when you have a population that has genetic similarity and diseases we pass on, we get to call ourselves a people, not to get political. That's not simply a religion. That's an ethnic group that has a distinct genetic profile. And there's something like, they did some study and it's like all Eastern European Jews are descended from three women or something, right? Anyway, so you have kind of two things going on. You have a preference for survival genes, and you have a small gene pool. So they're essentially getting amplified. And that's why we do talk about that sort of like Jewish personality type, which often is, has high rates of anxiety in particular, depression, more than alcoholism. There's these studies that like Jewish men don't drink, they just get depressed, whereas in other populations, you'll see alcoholism, kind of masking some of that depression. So there's also been some fascinating studies post-Holocaust, many out of Israel, professors in Israel, about the trauma that is sort of, transgenerational, meaning, even grandchildren of people who survived the Holocaust, have patterns of behavior that mimic the kind of coping mechanisms that were taken on. And, that's sort of the environment part of nature versus nurture. But again, those things get passed on. And it's like, I love when Jewish friends of mine who are incredibly neurotic wonder why their child has anxiety. It's like, gee, I don't know. And again, that's that self-awareness,
That's amazing. Can we do word of the day? Can I give you one?
Yeah, I can try.
Fantastic.
No, usually I don't prepare for them. Usually Jonathan surprises me. So
good.
We'll see how this goes.
Okay, fantastic. Epigenetics.
Epigenetics is the stuff surrounding us that can impact our genes, because genes are not just like there and then nothing happens. Genes are affected by things all the time, and you can have differential gene expression depending on situations and environment. So epigenetics is kind of talk about everything else that's not simply, what are the amino acids that are lining up.
do we change ourselves over the course of our lives? Are we changing our kids? Are we then handing down those changes in our genetics to the next generation? Like when I think about genetics, I think about like 30,000 years or, 150,000 years or whatever. But this seems like a much smaller compressed time frame.
Yeah, I mean, this is the beauty and mystery of the human experience is that, you're going to have individual gene expression that's different depending on an environment. And also, it's a very complicated interplay of things that are also, set in stone as they were. Like I'm always going to be, well, roughly, I'm always going to be this tall. I mean, I've started shrinking. It's already started happening. Right. No, but there are certain things about us that are not changeable. And, I think that comes up, I think for anyone who's ever had someone say, why can't you be, more flexible, less rigid, more, less weepy, more sensitive, those are the kind of things that we can learn skills to kind of shift that. But it's also true, and we see this in a lot of gender studies, it's also true that brains are wired a certain way. And we do see propensities that can be very hard, to break. But I do believe that for the most part, people don't want to change. And I think many people don't want to put in the work to change in significant ways. However, I've seen miracles, I've seen miracles in my life of people who put in the work and can change things about them you never thought could change.
Can you tell me about something that you've changed?
Oh gosh. There's a list of things yet to change. I have a lot of, many of us do. I have a lot of like stories that play in my head, we often call them organizing principles, the things that we, in any situation that's negative, that we will assume are true about us, right? So if your organizing principle is that you're unlovable, you essentially are scanning the world for experiences that confirm that because it's the most comfortable thing to come. So if someone breaks up with you, it's because I'm not lovable instead of, oh, it wasn't a match, right? So trying to break those organizing principle kind of tracks is very, very hard. But one of the things that my therapist has been working with me on is not filling in the blanks of an interaction or a story. And the way to do that is simply to stop doing it. Meaning, if you get incomplete information in an interaction with someone, in a text, instead of assuming, well, that must mean they don't like me because of that thing I said yesterday, I should stop speaking to them, right? Like I'll burn things down all by myself without you even participating, So that's one of those things that there's no magic to it. You simply, you have to stop yourself from continuing to fill in those stories because they inevitably lead back to those kind of organizing principles that don't leave anyone, feeling good. And the story that we imagine in our head is almost always worse than the reality. So part of that is slowing down. Part of that is pausing instead of reacting. We say like respond instead of react. That takes time. And I wasn't raised where there was any time. Like everything was like this. Like if someone's yelling at you, you better yell back right away. Like don't wait, So many of us aren't taught to take that time. So I know that's kind of a broad answer, but that's what it's like to talk to someone who's been in therapy as long as I have. Like those are the processes. It's not just like, why can't I get over this? It's like, oh, I'm often doing this, which is leading to this, which is leading to that.
Right. So I would say that this is probably the fifth time just in our conversation now that you've talked about self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be.
It's a blessing and a curse.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Oh, we're so lucky. The audience wants to know about stories or characters in the Torah that you personally identify as exemplars of mental health challenges.
Oh my gosh.
I gotta say, I cannot really come up with any. Just off the top of my head, we have a lot of messed up stories. In fact, if anything, the Torah is the story about imperfect people still managing to hold together.
Right. That's
in a narrative.
That's what I was thinking. Look, we have some characters go crazy in the Torah. A lot of the female characters experience deep grief and loss. The pain of not being able to have a child when you want one. I mean, I could do this all day. You know,
or having your
Sarah's
husband take said child up onto the
there.
top. And
Well, I didn't even get there. I was thinking more of Sarah and Hagar, you know. You know, no one would blame Sarah for her jealousy, you know, or her envy. But, you know, also turning that into send her out. I mean, there's a lot of complexity there. And then also, yes, to experience a near sacrifice. You know, I mean, all of the prophets who had these unbelievable visions and were, you know, discussing impending doom, like those were very complicated people, especially the sages who were chosen to have that level of awareness, who were that in touch, are often those who may seem, you know, questionable in their otherwise, you know, sanity. And many, you know, I mean, when you look at indigenous cultures, for example, like there's a fine line between shaman and a person that we would put in a mental hospital, right? People who see visions, people who have that kind of, you know, that kind of power, that kind of spiritual power. You know, Moshe, I think, was very tormented. Poor guy, like kind of had it rough. It was really hard. I think of Joseph also, you know, an exceptional character. You know, Rabbi Chaim Seidler-Feller, who's my Rav, you know, he gave me a book. I cannot remember what it was called, but it was basically role play through the relationships of Torah and how therapeutic they can be to act out those different relationships and interact. I know it was so good. I'll have to ask him what it was. But anyway, you know, to me, that was like a real, and that was early in my, you know, UCLA Hillel years that he gave me that book. But, you know, that's a really good, that's a great example of, you know, in any complexity of relationship, you're going to have mental health challenges. It's going to come up. You know, it's fear, it's anxiety, it's resentment, it's all those things. I'm trying to think of other females, you know, in particular. Yeah, I mean, I think of Hannah, you know, I think of her prayer and yeah.
Right, and Hannah, the priest assumes that she's drunk and they're
correct,
totally unstable, right? And then she becomes the example.
I mean, she's the first woman in history called hysterical for having feelings, you know.
Fantastic. So the Bible, let's call it unvarnished in terms of the characters that it puts in front of us. You know, some of them either did actually, you know, kill somebody and marry their wife, you know, all kinds of other different stuff. And there's still people that we look up to, which is fascinating. And yet today, right, a lot of the people that we're looking up to have some kind of celebrity attached to them. What's happening in that world? One of our students was asking, like, what's happening in that world? Like, you've made a choice to be very open. I think that there's other people who are out there who are, you know, not. They're always putting on airs.
Yeah, I mean, this is, you know, this is a big one. You know, when you think of kind of the history of cinema, and, you know, you think about motion picture history, people knew pretty much nothing about the celebrities, you know, of the 1930s and the 1940s, you know, and even into the 50s. You know, we start getting, you know, Marilyn Monroe being one of those characters that people really gravitated around, like, what's going on with her? And, like, you know, she was found naked, you know, like all these things. But the notion of knowing so much or thinking you have access to so much about celebrities is a really modern invention. Even when I was on Blossom, you know, that was 30 years ago, people. When I was on Blossom, people didn't really care, like, what stylist was styling Mayim Bialik, you know, and, you know, no one was like looking, is she wearing designer clothing? Like, does she have fake lashes? And what about her hair extensions? Like, you know, in just those years, we've seen such a shift in even how, in particular, how we treat women and young women. You know, I think there's a lot of emphasis surrounding, you know, this kind of varnished pleasantness. And look, entertainment is supposed to be entertainment. It's supposed to be an escape. But I don't, you know, for me, I always really resonated more with musicians and thinkers rather than like actors and models, you know. And I think the world of modeling has become more of a part of our lives than we even realize, you know, in terms of who is cast for what. You know, the simple answer is the patriarchy. And I don't mean that like men are the problem. I mean that the structure, no, I mean like the structure of a society that is geared in a particular way. And I mean, I hate to say it, like a capitalist society where we're looking for clicks and we're looking for, for viewership because it leads to money. Like it's not normal. It's not like a normal perception of reality. And it's funny because having kids, and we're not really a TV family, but there's been some times on plane rides, where we've been like, oh, what's on this magic screen on the seat in front of us? And, even the shows that are geared towards young kids, it's like this very, kind of like even the younger ones, like even some of the Nickelodeon stuff, it's like nobody talks like, my kids would say, why are they talking like that? Why is everyone talking like that? And it's like, it's very, very strange. So
we went on a trip while my daughter was watching, I think it must have been Peppa Pig or something like that. And for 3 weeks, this 3-year-old would end everything by going,
yeah, that's
not normal.
That's cuter than other catchphrases, but yeah.
Indeed.
No, but I think, there's a lot there. And, celebrity is a reflection of our culture. It's a reflection of what we want to escape to, what we find interesting. I was just watching the Britney Spears, New York Times Framing Britney Spears documentary. And honestly, it tells more about the fan world than her world,
Yeah. You just said we're not really a TV family. And I think I heard on your podcast, like, oh, I sort of discovered Netflix like 10 years after after the fact. And yet, like, you're on TV. How much TV are your kids watching? And is that a deliberate choice? Is it not?
Yeah, I mean, we were, we were a Waldorf family, which is a no TV, also no batteries. So like we never had anything that lit up or made noise in our house, which is like amazing. Just as a person who doesn't like noise, it was the best way to have my home. But yeah, we did not raise them watching television. And I know people like, not even Sesame Street. No, for the first formative years of their life, not even Sesame Street. They did not interact that way. We felt that the most significant interaction we wanted them to have was with our faces and, and humans. So that was a choice. I don't say that that's the best choice for everyone. The best choice, also people assume like, oh, she must have had nanny. Like we didn't have a nanny. I didn't have a housekeeper. I didn't have my parents helping. It was me and my then husband raising our kids, freaking out, wondering why we decided to have children at all, because it's so crazy. So that's kind of what their early life was like. And, to be honest, like it never really appealed to us to turn them on to like sitcoms, or it's not our sensibility. We would definitely start watching movies with them. I think more after we got divorced. They were 4 and 7. And I'd say they started watching some movies then, but I didn't even have TV. Like I just had, like what's that Apple thing? It's like a little square Apple TV. Yeah, I had Apple TV, but not like TV. So, yeah, we just never really got into the rhythm of sitcoms. And whenever I would try and even imagine showing them, there was just like always something that was like, oh, no. And I also tend to be socially conservative. So a lot of stuff on TV it's just not my sensibility. A lot of the, like sex jokes for kids and things like that. Like, oh, it goes over their head, but like, it doesn't, I mean, some stuff does, but it's like, why am I watching something that needs to go over their head? So it just wasn't how we were oriented. And, they saw The Big Bang Theory when they came to my work, like to watch an episode of like What Mama Does, but no, it was never really their thing. And they were still young. And I think there's a lot of content on Big Bang Theory that I didn't want them watching. So that's just kind of how it evolved. They like cartoons, they'll watch Avatar Last Airbender. Like that was like a big deal. And now they watch Mandalorian with their dad. But I also, as a divorced mom, like I don't get to see them for significant portions of my work week. So when I'm with them, one day is Shabbos. And so I don't want to necessarily spend time, with them dialed into TV. They do play video games because that's what, that is what they do. And we sometimes will do like a family movie. But yeah, we try and keep our interaction, as much as I can with them kind of more organic. They watch more at their dad's house, which is fine,
Fascinating. So somebody in the audience wants to know about sort of the loss of modesty around, and I think specifically like around TV, celebrity culture, President Clinton coming and talking about his underwear on Arsenio Hall, like, you don't really see right? You don't really see that happening if you open an old edition of Time magazine, right? Like it's sort
Right.
of unfathomable. What I think it's clear that that's happening. What's happening to us as a result of sort of all of this kind of
I
law?
mean, look, I think, I think there's a desensitization. I think there's a devaluation, not meaning that like you don't value people if they wear short skirts or whatever. But the notion of kind of like losing that, even that concept of an outward presence versus an inward presence, or, just like we have like an outdoor voice and an indoor voice. I have outdoor clothes and I have indoor clothes, but that's just me, like for me, I don't like wearing like yoga leggings out of the house. It's just like, to me, those are clothing that fit a very specific circumstance in my life. And I don't also wear pants outside of the house. I should say that, with a very few exceptions of I've like run to get the mail in my sweats, a couple times. But, I would direct people to Wendy Shalit, her book, A Return to Modesty, which, her latest edition is phenomenal. And, it's a really eloquent analysis of what it means to our culture. For me, I definitely think that there's a lot of value to having a different notion of what's public and what's private, not just in terms of modesty, but in terms of everything. And that's as someone who shares a lot about my personal life, but you don't know everything, And so I guess, I tend to be old fashioned, and, the beauty of the king's daughter is on the inside. That is one of the things we are taught. And there's a notion of modesty that's not just about what you dress like, but also how you, how you conduct yourself. And those laws apply to men and women equally. The laws of tznius, of modesty, do apply to men. And there are rules about men's clothing. As with most things, it's more restrictive for women. And that's culture. That's all cultures. It's not just Judaism. But in particular, the notion of decorum, which is, has been lost to a large sense, that is something that I do hold valuable. And look, it comes into play as an actor on a TV show. Like, I'm asked to talk about things that, sometimes feel like, and it's something that I have to, kind of constantly weigh.
Fascinating. Let's talk about practice, because, we're talking about wellness. In my mind, diet, sleep, exercise, have been kind of the things that help hold me together. I don't mean dieting. I mean, the food that I put in my body, getting a good night's sleep. I exercise or do something almost every day. Just go for a walk, go for a surf, go for a run. If you could do something to support mental health in 2 minutes a day, in 5 minutes a day, or in 10 minutes a day, what would you recommend?
Do you mean what would those things be for 2, 5, and 10 minutes, or do I have to pick
words,
2, 5, or 10 minutes?
No, give us some practices.
Like, what's a 2-minute thing? What's a 5-minute thing? What's a 10-minute thing?
Yeah,
okay, got it.
You got it.
Well, for those of you who've never meditated or got quiet, try that for 2 minutes. It's harder than you think, and it's also much more significantly positively impactful than you think. Sitting for 2 minutes, especially first thing when you wake up. I mean, if you have to go pee, go pee. But before you turn on your phone, before you lift up your phone, sit. Don't lay. It's not the same thing. Sit in silence. Sit at the edge of your bed, 2 minutes. 5 minutes? I think that 5 minutes is a break between calls for me, where instead of answering emails in those 5 minutes, I get up, even like walk outside, breathe the air, get a snack. A lot of us forget to kind of feed our system that way. I can't tell you how many people I know that put off going to the bathroom. It's like, oh, I'll just make it through another call, but like, that's a thing like that, we need to make time for that. 10 minutes, that's a phone call to my mom, that's like, being of service to someone who could use it. One of the best ways to fill ourselves up is to help someone else feel filled up. That's do unto others, if you want to like find the Jewish source of it. So yeah, that's like I can get out of my head. I can get out of my stress, my mishigas, my thinking that I'm the most terminally unique, upset, stressed out person ever, to say like, what can I do for someone else? That's, it's an outreach call of sorts. And if you have 20 minutes, that's walking. You can walk for 10 minutes, but doctors do recommend 20-minute minimum. So
yes. Yeah. Although it is interesting that the 7 to 10 minute high intensity workout seems to be pretty good for people. I think.
Okay, but that's from someone like you who's fit. Yeah, I was gonna say like you seem a lot more fit than I am.
I don't know. We'll go for a run sometimes. We'll see how it goes.
I'll meet you. You can circle me twice and I'll meet you.
Institutionally, employers, Hillels, right? We're sort of thinking about this on behalf of employees, maybe on behalf of our students. We're doing a lot more thinking at Hillel about just institutional best practices. We've taken the position for the last few years that like it just needs to be integrated into everything. Or we have thought about hiring a psychotherapist and actually putting them here. There are 4 Hillels that have actually done that. I'm kind of waiting to see how that actually looks. But for several years, there's been an emphasis on making connections between people, supporting spiritual practice, doing Zumba, running around the campus, like whatever it may be, diet, sleep, exercise, kind of support. What should institutions, employers, nonprofits, be thinking about?
Well, I know from my very limited experience, I know what I need. I know what I needed as a student, and I know what a lot of our students, probably do need. And I do think access to mental health information, at the least, is critically important. For me, Hillel was always a safe space, like literally. And so, the fact that I know, in COVID times it's hard, but in the scope of our Hillel history, God willing, this will be, a small portion of our story. Hillel was like my cheers. It was the place where like, everybody knew everybody's name. Yeah. It's like everybody knew. Yeah, everybody knew everybody's name. It wasn't just because I was on TV or whatever, or because I was like a famous person. Like that was the place where there was a piano I could play. There was always someone I knew there, like that level of connection. So, for me, institutionally, like, for those of you who haven't, donated to Hillel in a while, I would implore you to do so. No, because like, that's what that is like. That's the only way that we get to keep those things going. And so like, for me, that's why Hillel is a part of my will. It's so awkward to say that. There's not like a okay way to say that. But, for me, like that, ensuring that experience exists, especially as Hillel, has placed itself as a progressive member, of the collegiate community and the global Jewish community, the fact that Hillels are listening to mental health needs, like these are things that are only going to increase in need, and I think it's really sweet that in the Jewish community, no matter the other resources, and look, I went to UCLA, I was there for 12 years, from undergraduate to graduate, like no matter how many things were going on or how many bars you could go to or concerts or this, like that was always my place to stop in, and to be there. So I think that the well-being of staff is as important. My goal as someone who, I have a small business, I have a production company. We employed 2 people, but we just took on a 3rd as a possible, hire. And for me, like it's most important for mental health and for the wellness of businesses, for people to enjoy what they're doing, to feel respected, to feel that that's a place for them, and for them to get help when they need it. And simple things that I've, had to deal with. One of my 2 employees just took paternity leave. And it's like, that's important for his mental health, to know that he can be with his wife and their newborn. Like that adds so much. And, I work in Hollywood where there's not, there's not a lot of room, oftentimes. And I think large institutions have that challenge as well. But being able to continue existing and to continue to keep programming through all of it is the most important thing, at least for me, when I put myself in my, student mindset.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's almost sort of the anti isolation, thing that you were talking about. Like, you can actually come to university and mostly stay in your room.
And honestly, like, in any community, especially, of young people, you'll see that person who clearly doesn't have a lot of friends. And I will say that Hillel, like, I'm gonna cry right now. Hillel was the place where, like, that person was never alone.
Right.
I mean, it's true. Like, you'd sit in services and, like, we're all the same when we sit in services. We're all the same when we eat a meal together. We're all the same when we go to a lecture together. And I'm sure that there are places where it feels like a popularity contest, and life is a popularity contest. Like, for anyone who doesn't fit the mold, like, if you're a student out there, like, it's a popularity contest. Like, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But, at a place like Hillel, like, that was beautiful. No one was alone.
Is that a Homo sapiens thing? Like, why should that be? Life is a popularity. Like, why is that evolutionarily important?
I mean, it's a different kind of fitness, survival, I guess. And, I don't want to say that, look, I'm sure we'd have a ball listing all the, like, very, very famous, productive, successful inventors and people who no one wanted to hang out with at lunch, like
Steve Jobs.
I mean, right. Like, I was in chess club, believe me, like, I was the only girl in chess club. It was not like, that's just what it was. So yeah, you too can be a neurotic adult if you were in chess club.
Fantastic. People are interested in knowing a little bit about you, if you're willing.
Sure.
Around the issues where you decide to stick your neck out and take a risk and risk some blowback, and places that maybe you don't. So, around Jewish and Zionist issues, certainly it seems like you've been willing to step up. I'm wondering why, that versus something that maybe you've chosen not to.
I have to be much more careful. Well, I choose to be much more careful now, selective about how much I do post about Jewish stuff and Israel, because it, produces so much mayhem, on social media. And, there are people who don't care if I'm a liberal or a conservative. They don't care if I support a two-state solution, or, like, they don't care. And I would say that most of the most vocal people who, wish that I would die, on the internet, it's because they don't like Jews. It's really not about my politics. So that kind of, when I realized that, like, it kind of removed a little bit of the pressure. I've taken the opportunity to use my platform to educate people about the definition of Zionism, which many people don't know, because it is hurled around as if it's equivalent to Nazism. Meaning Mayim Bialik is a Zionist, is literally something that I have seen on flyers when Palestinian student groups have protested my speaking on other campuses across the United States. She's a Zionist. Like, that's an accusation of something that everyone should agree should not be allowed. So I've used my platform to educate. I have a lot of young fans and a lot of fans all over the world who may not know a lot about Jews or Judaism. So that's something I felt kind of an academic obligation to do. But I'll give an example of something that I've chosen not to talk about: circumcision. Like, that is something people who want to talk about circumcision not being okay, they don't want to have a conversation with me. So, that I learned very quickly, like, well, not really a conversation to have. And, mental health is something I feel very passionate about. And also, it's hard because, like, I'm one of those people who donates to, like, every charity, like everything, like every issue touches me at some point in my life, like animals, children, Jews, non-Jews, like, name it, like cars, trucks, boats, like there's a reason for me to feel and donate for everything. Like special needs people, like, name it. So it's hard as a public person to be like, here's all the things that you need to do, because it loses power in terms of people getting flooded. So, you have to be selective, as it were, so that you can also be as impactful as you can. So mental health, all things Jewish, those tend to be the places that I most resonate. And also women's issues, both within Judaism and even in Orthodox Judaism. And, you know, feminism as an academic concept, which is not just that women deserve equal rights, but that women have an innate ability to transmit a level of compassion and understanding so that we can free people of the bonds of race, class, and gender. So yeah, that's...
Wow, beautiful. Do you get pushback on that?
Oh yeah, I mean, plenty of people just, again, like plenty of people just like think that women are lame, which is fine. You know, you're allowed to think that.
No, but what about from the other side? In other words, we don't want to say that women are somehow different.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, I'm trying to keep up. You know, I'm like a second wave feminist, which means I'm like a dinosaur. You know, I'm a Gloria Steinem, like Hillary Clinton, you know, kind of gal. You know, like the Nicki Minaj and Lizzo feminism. It's very different, you know, from what I was raised with, but that doesn't mean that it's not feminism or that it can't be part of a conversation. But yeah, I think especially people who don't understand why I like Judaism. You know, a lot of people have problems with some of the aspects of traditional Judaism that I choose not to dismiss because there are so many benefits to the way that I do like to and love to live. So yeah, there's kind of that kind of pushback. Well, how can you be a religious person and say you're a feminist? Or we're all the same, and just like men, you know, seek sex, women can seek sex, which is not untrue. You know, there's a lot of subtlety and nuance, again, like to everyone's experience of the patriarchy.
Okay, so that's a piece of wellness that we didn't talk about. Sex, love, romance.
Yeah, why?
Look
at the time, gotta go.
Oh yeah, no, we've got 6 minutes. Oh yeah, no, we're going.
Well, you know, I mean, what I've heard, you know, from many people who are single or, you know, who have chosen to date more freely is that a lot of people have experienced 2020 as a year of reckoning. You know, a year of experiencing a different kind of loneliness, not just because you can't get out on dating apps like you used to, and many people still are, you know, but that notion of like, what does it mean to be alone? What does it mean to want companionship? And, you know, for me, it's been a very interesting year. I started, you know, dating the person that I'm dating just before the pandemic. And so it's also been a year of like, gosh, I do feel more needy right now. I think a lot of us do. And so then trying to distinguish that from like, what's a healthy sense of, you know, dependence. And, you know, I actually got a question on the podcast about this, like, how can I be more sex and body positive? And, you know, for many people ask that question, they would say like, get out there, like take a, you know, what's it, the stripper classes with the pole, like that's not, yeah, like that's not my thing. And it might be your thing, but like, if you're asking me, I would say like, great opportunity to get into therapy to discuss, you know, your issues of shame and formative concepts about sexuality and gender, as opposed to just like, get out there and take a, you know, pole class. I don't know. I'm old fashioned.
What's going to happen to us in, you know, the next 6
You and me? I don't know, Rabbi
Lerner. As we merge, it seems that, you know, my kids are like going back to school 1 day a week right now. That's actually hard. You would think that they want to do that. But it seems like, you know, some of us have actually to the rhythms, or some of us realize we don't like our commutes, or we don't like our coworkers, or you know, whatever it may be. Like,
I don't like putting on pants.
Yeah, there's like a lot of excitement about the return to whatever the new normal is going to be, but I actually think it's going to be hard. Like, what do you think?
Oh, I think the mental health impacts of what we're seeing now, like this is going to be kind of years of coming to terms with this. I think we're going to see a lot of things, and it may be hard to distinguish like, well, would this have happened anyway because of the pandemic? But yeah, this is a huge year, especially for teenagers, you know, and especially for older people. You know, my mother was just getting used to my father having died when this pandemic hit, and she's now essentially alone all the time. You know, I mean, that's devastating. Like, we're going to see effects of that. It's enormous. And, you know, I miss shul. That's really the only thing that I can say I like properly miss. You know, like, of course I miss like being able to see my mother. I miss a lot of ease in life, which has kind of gone away. Like, oh, I want to run and get this thing, or like, oh, it's my friend's birthday, I want to drop off and get, like, those things have been hard. But yeah, I miss my community. It's not this, I choose not to Zoom on Shabbos. It's just a personal choice of mine. I choose not to Zoom on Yantif. And it's, it's sad. It's sad and it's hard. I'm planning my younger son's bar mitzvah, God willing, which will be B'Eschanan, which is end of July. And like, we're probably going to just hope that we have enough vaccinated people in our family to have a minyan in a backyard, and like, in the scope of the universe, this is like my first world COVID problem, is that like my son's bar mitzvah has to be in my backyard. There are people who have far more significant challenges, but I'm saying in terms of how we are shaping our lives, we're still in a process of seeing how this unfolds, and I think that I hope that a lot of people have taken this year as an opportunity to do reflecting, I have heard that from a lot of people that, it's been like I'm thinking of it as like a tzimtzum, it's like that great divine contraction, that has to happen before a tremendous growth or expansion. So that's kind of how I've been thinking about, aspects of this year. I've done a lot of work on myself, and I mean in therapy, writing assignments, like I've dug deep. So I think for many of us, hopefully we will see the benefits of that deep digging, but also literally only God knows what the trajectory is. So I want to say like, well, I did all this work on myself, so next year's going to be great. I don't know. Like, I don't know what my derech ultimately is, but we get to just like literally do it one day at a time.
Mayim, this has been a great conversation.
We should do this more often. This was
totally.
Great.
Where can
next
people
time
go
I interview you?
I would love that. Where can people go to find out more?
Let's see. I mean, like about the universe?
Yeah, what are your favorite wellness resources? What are you particularly offering? Your podcast.
Yeah, I mean, our podcast has a website and we have a lot of, I see that it's in the chat. We do have a lot of resources there. And what we do is for every episode, we link to some articles with some basic information and further links if people want to learn more. If you haven't checked out my podcast, it's very, very, it's fun. And people are really, really loving it. We've done an episode on anxiety, and we've done we've done a couple on addiction now, and depression. We did one on Leslie Jordan, who is on the show that I work on, Call Me Kat, about his experience growing up, young and gay, in a time when people didn't talk about it. And also his drug addiction and how it really was masking depression. So our episodes have been really fun. So I do recommend people check those out. Yeah, and I'm on social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram as Miss Mayim. I'm on Twitter, don't use it a ton, but we try and tweet things out. Yeah. And in terms of like my favorite mental health resources, NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness, is my favorite resource for all things mental health. It's NAMI.org. And they have support groups, information sessions, and they can help you find a chapter in your city if you need help or support. They have crisis lines, and it's a service I've used when my family has been in crisis. And so I recommend them really for any kind of start of a mental health conversation.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to send out resources to everybody who registered afterwards so that they'll get all the links.
Awesome.
We really appreciate it.
And this was really lovely. I mean, for people who may not know, I won't let it go too long, but like for people who may not know, like this is my Hillel, so to be able to do this with Rabbi Aaron is, it's an honor and it's a privilege that this is where I was raised. I learned how to be a Jewish adult at Hillel. I learned how to be on a board. I had never sat on a board. I don't come from a wealthy family where anyone was asked to sit on boards or donate money. And I learned the structure of a corporate organization through Hillel and through the principles of the Jewish faith, like the ethics of our fathers and mothers are in those hallways. So if you're new to the Hillel community, or if you liked what we did tonight, please help support our Hillel. It really means everything to us. So thank you.
I really appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Do I just go bye-bye now? Everybody goes bye-bye?
Yeah. Okay. Until next time. I know it's so weird.
Thank you, Giselle. Thank you, everybody who was behind the scenes putting this together. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to can I switch to gallery view?
We love your Hillel heart so much.
Oh, thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye. I'm waving it.